So this offseason, Alabama fans everywhere have been watching closely, wondering what moves Nick Saban would make, both at the offensive coordinator and defensive coordinator positions, as both remain open. However, today, we need to turn our attention to the offensive coordinator position, because it seems that the search may have met its end. And we need to talk about Tommy Rees, the former Notre Dame offensive coordinator who the Crimson Tide have turned their attention to. We need to break this down, talk about what this means, and also I want to give my thoughts on the defensive coordinator search. But before we can get to all of that, y'all know the drill. I have got to hear from you. Hop down to the comments, give me a Y for yes or an N for no. Are you excited at the prospect of Alabama bringing on Tommy Rees? And let me know what you're thinking. If you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe. Hit that bell notification as I do constant college football content. You don't want to miss any of it. And if you enjoyed this content, be sure to like and comment down below, as those interactions may seem small, but they are massive. And we're on a push to 20,000 subscribers. I'd love nothing more than to have you a part of this unbelievable community. But having said all that, let's jump right into this. And Tommy Rees is an interesting individual. And if you check Twitter right now, you're going to get two vastly differing opinions, as is the norm on Twitter. And this is why I wanted to have this conversation, because I think it's a very necessary one to have. If you're the type of individual that instantly goes to the stats, you're very likely to come away with one conclusion. However, if you're the type of individual that instantly goes to the film and turns that on, you're likely to come away with a totally separate conclusion. And this is where this gets to be such an interesting conversation, one we absolutely had to have. First and foremost, let's start with who is Tommy Rees. Tommy Rees is an individual who played quarterback for Brian Kelly and Notre Dame and then was hired on and made his way up the ranks. He started, just like most people do, as a GA and then moved up from there to quarterback coach and finally becoming the offensive coordinator. And if you're in a position where you're bringing in a new offensive coordinator, there are a few factors about Tommy Rees that I really like. First and foremost, he's a young guy. He's going to be able to connect with these recruits, in theory, easier. And when you look at how Notre Dame utilized him on the trail, he was active. So I really do like that. He was active in recruiting. He's a young guy. The other thing I really like about this move is that Tommy Rees was a quarterback coach. And whenever you're the Alabama Crimson Tide, breaking in a new quarterback along with a new offensive coordinator, you want someone that has familiarity with that quarterback position. You want someone that knows what it takes to be successful coaching that quarterback, coaching the offense. And that's something that Tommy Rees can give you. And that's something I do find to be a compelling factor in this conversation. Having that familiarity with that position, especially when you have two new names, albeit very talented, in Jalen Milroe and Ty Simpson, who look to battle for that position. I think getting in a guy that was a college quarterback, worked with college quarterbacks, and then became an offensive coordinator bodes well for the future of that position, and I'm really intrigued to see how it goes, especially when we look in the class of 2024, and Alabama has one of the most gifted players in the entire recruiting process, Julian Saban, committed. Getting in an offensive coordinator that has familiarity with the quarterback positions, well, that's going to excite future quarterbacks, and I do find that compelling once again. But I do want to turn our attention back to something I referenced a little bit earlier, that if you were someone who just checks the stats, you are likely to come away with one conclusion as opposed to someone who watches the film who probably would come away with another one. And I want to address this because whenever the Tommy Rees news started circulating, I instantly went to the stats because I wanted to get an idea, an inclination as to where this Notre Dame offense sat before I turned on the film. That way I could go ahead and kind of form a hypothesis. And whenever you look at where they sat, it leaves a lot to be desired. There is no debate about that. This was a middle-of-the-road offense in a lot of different categories. They were just outside the top 40 offenses in the nation, and that's not where you want to be, especially if you're trying to compete for college football playoff positions. And an institution like Notre Dame, that's the standard. You can go down to the comments and say they get smoked every time they go to the playoffs, and that might be true, but if you ask the Notre Dame faithful, their expectations are competing at the highest level of college football. And getting to the playoffs is competing at the highest level of college football. It's going to be very tough to do that if you have an offense that's very middle of the road. Now, once again, turning your attention to the opposite side of the conversation, why do I say if you turn on the film, you might come away with a different idea? You might come away with a different mindset. Because whenever you watch the offense, it's not devout of creativity. And that was my biggest complaint with Bill O'Brien. It's not that Bill O'Brien had a terrible offense, it's that the offense lacked any form of creativity. On top of the offense was at its most dangerous when the play fundamentally broke down, failed, and Bryce Young had to improvise. In my opinion, that's not good. It shouldn't be the case that your offense is its most effective when the plays you're calling fundamentally fail and your quarterback has got to try and salvage anything he can. That's not where you want to be either. But when you turn on the film for Notre Dame, what you do see out of Tommy Rees is an offense that is creative. He is scheming guys open. He is trying to get guys open, whether that's clear out concepts. He's got a lot of different concepts, a lot of different schemes that he will utilize to try and maximize his offense's capabilities. And another thing I really liked is when you listen to the interviews afterwards where he's breaking down the game and he'll talk about, we didn't use a 2 running back set against this team because their defense is much more predicated on stopping that type of offense. But if you look back X amount of games, we used it here. Meaning he's tailoring offenses to what the defense is giving him. Now, one of the things you'll notice when you watch Notre Dame is not only was there a lot left to be desired with where their offense sat statistically, there was a lot left to be desired in some of those rooms. They didn't have All-Americans on this team outside of the tight end position, which the tight end position was fantastic, and he went for almost 1,000 yards. He was utilized heavily in this offense. Reese made sure of that. They also had 2 running backs go for over 800 yards. So the rushing attack was there. The tight end usage was there. The wide receiver play left a lot to be desired, and the quarterback play was up and down. And you might be asking yourself, but Ty, you just said he was a quarterback coach, and that's something that excited you, that he could come in and work with these quarterbacks, so why was quarterback play up and down? And that's fair, and I have 2 responses to that. First, we'd seen what he'd done with Ian Book, where he had some continuity, where Notre Dame knew who their quarterback was. He was able to find success with Book. However, when Notre Dame transitioned, and it didn't ever even look like they were 100% certain as to who they wanted the quarterback to be, it made a little bit of sense to me when that room had some chaos in it. Whether it was Drew Pine, whether it was Buckner, they were bouncing back and forth, and to me it's hard to get an offensive identity when you're not even 1,000% convinced as to who the correct pieces are. So hopefully in a transition, that would be solved, especially with the very talented quarterbacks I believe Alabama has. And I've been on the record saying this. I think the wide receivers Alabama fields are going to be very talented as well. You look at the young guys that got involved. You look at Malik Benson. I think there's talent there, but whenever you ask your entire wide receiver core to run 6-yard curls and everybody's staring at Bryce Young afterwards wondering what to do, it's kind of hard for them to get separation. But this is something I'm super intrigued about. Before we get out of here, though, I did want to address the defensive coordinator position because we've heard some traction with the offensive coordinator position, whether that was Ryan Grubb, whether that's Reese. We've heard names attached to it, Jeff Lebby even. But we haven't heard as much traction with the defensive coordinator position. Now, at the beginning, we'd heard several names, from Schumann to Leonard to Pruitt, but ever since then, the case has gone cold. We haven't gotten too much new information, and in my opinion, that's saying a lot. Sometimes saying nothing is saying the quiet part out loud. And in my opinion, the fact that we've seen this trail kind of go cold for Alabama as fans dictates to us that Nick Saban knows exactly who he wants, or at least in my opinion. Once again, there is no information coming from this. This is just my thoughts on the matter. I totally believe Nick Saban knows exactly who he wants to go with. Furthermore, I think they're just waiting to get the okay, and you've probably put 2 and 2 together to understand who I'm talking about, and that's Jeremy Pruitt. I think the fact that we haven't heard much traction, much of anything on the defensive coordinator position signals that Nick Saban knows who he wants and they're waiting on something. Well, the one candidate who satisfies that is Jeremy Pruitt. The familiarity with Nick Saban, the familiarity with Alabama, the familiarity with the SEC. He was a great defensive coordinator the last time he was with the Crimson Tide, where they had back-to-back #1 defenses in the nation. Getting him back would be a massive win, but they have to wait on the NCAA. To me, that would make perfect sense as to why the trail for the defensive coordinator information has been a little bit cold. But at the end of the day, I'm very interested in hearing from all of you. Hop down to the comments, let me know what you think about this, because like I said, the Tommy Rees one, there's an interesting conversation to be had there. I know a lot of people are going to instantly go look at the stats, and you're going to come away with a conclusion because that Notre Dame offense was very much, middle of the road in almost every category. The tight end did very well. The running backs did very well, which, what's one thing I always say? If you're breaking in a new quarterback, Great running back play, great tight end play can be your new quarterback and new offense's best friends, and Tommy Rees has showed he's willing to utilize both of those positions. Now, personally, when I watch the film of Notre Dame, I see an offensive coordinator who's trying to get creative. I see an offensive coordinator who's trying to scheme guys up, but there was a lot left to be desired in wide receiver play for Notre Dame and quarterback play, and they weren't even 100% certain, it felt like, as to who they wanted to be their guy, which makes complete sense when they bring in a big-name transfer portal quarterback in the offseason. They wanted to get a better direction there. So, very interested to see what could happen with Tommy Rees. Very interested in hearing from all of you. Hop down in the comments. Let me know what you're thinking. That's it. See ya.